The drought hit in late August, the kind that turns lakes into mirrors of cracked clay. By the third week, Silvercross Reservoir had fallen nearly 20 feet below its usual level. Fishermen started walking where they once cast lines. Old stumps, fence posts, even rusted farm equipment began to surface from the shrinking waterline. Then, one afternoon, a pair of brothers dragging nets for debris noticed a reflection, metal, curved, half buried in mud. When they scraped at it, paint the color of midnight blue appeared. A license plate followed, AZ349TD. It was the car everyone had stopped talking about 21 years ago. The 2002 Honda Passport belonging to four missing friends from Tucson: Caleb Rhodes, Lenny Dale, Sofia Morales, and Grace Norton. The lake had kept its secret for 2 decades. September 2002. Until now. The group had planned a weekend getaway, just an easy campout before college resumed. Caleb was the organizer, the practical one, 22, studying mechanical engineering. Lenny was the storyteller, the class clown with a camera always slung around his neck. Sofia had just finished her nursing rotation, quiet but fearless behind the wheel. And Grace, the youngest at 20, was majoring in environmental science. She'd been documenting drought conditions for a school project even then. They left Tucson at 7 a.m. Saturday, texting family that they'd be at Silvercross Lake by noon. Receipts later showed a gas stop in Safford and a grocery run, trail mix, charcoal, bottled water, and a disposable camera. Everything looked ordinary. At 11:48 a.m., a highway camera caught their SUV turning off Route 60 toward the Reservoir Road. It was the last verified sighting. By Monday, when they hadn't returned, families filed reports. Sheriff Bill Harrington, then new to the county, organized a sweep of the 18-mile access loop. They found tire tracks ending abruptly near the lake's eastern edge, fresh enough to still show tread pattern, but no vehicle, no debris, no skid marks leading into the water. Divers searched the shallows for 2 weeks. Visibility was near zero. Silvercross was fed by red clay runoff that turned the water opaque. After 30 days, with no sign of wreckage or foul play, the case was suspended. Locals dubbed it the Vanished Four. Grace's mother, Elaine Norton, returned to the lake every summer for years afterward, walking the shoreline, leaving flowers near the boat ramp. Water keeps secrets, she used to say. And drought gives them back. In 2007, sonar mapping was attempted with newer equipment. It picked up one metallic anomaly near the dam's south end, but currents and depth made recovery impossible. Investigators filed it as indeterminate. The families slowly moved on. Marriages ended, addresses changed, but the case lingered in Arizona's missing person database, 4 faces frozen in early 2000s color tones. Then came the drought of 2023, the worst in half a century. Reservoir levels dropped fast, exposing the original riverbed. That's when the metal appeared. Deputies cordoned off the site. By evening, as pumps drained more water, the full roofline of the Honda came into view, windows intact, windshield clouded with silt. Divers anchored cables, and under the glare of generator lights, the SUV rose from the mud like something half alive, dripping rust-colored water. Inside were fragments of seats, backpacks, and what looked like a rolled-up sleeping bag jammed behind the console. Detective Renee Palmer, now heading cold cases for Graham County, arrived just after midnight. She'd been a rookie in 2002, assigned to filing. The moment she saw the license plate, she whispered, "It's them." Forensic crews moved carefully. They documented every layer of silt, every inch of the frame. In the rear seat, they found 2 human remains, seatbelted. In the front, partial skeletal evidence beneath collapsed dashboards. 4 individuals, consistent with the missing friends. Palmer watched the extraction under portable floodlights. For 21 years, the lake had held not just a car, but a timeline sealed in sediment. The news broke by morning. 4 friends found after 21 years. Vehicle recovered from Arizona lake. Helicopters circled overhead. Families arrived in caravans, faces half hopeful, half numb. Elaine Norton stood by the shoreline, clutching a small notebook, Grace's old field journal from college. Maybe she wrote something, she said quietly. She always wrote something. The question now wasn't where they'd gone. It was why no one had found them when they were just a few hundred feet from the search zone. Palmer reopened every archive, sonar logs, weather reports, road maintenance sheets. One detail caught her attention, dated September 8, 2002, 2 days after the group vanished. A flash flood warning had been issued for the region that night, following a storm upstream. If runoff from the canyon surged into the reservoir, it could have raised water levels enough to conceal a vehicle almost instantly. But that didn't explain the missing tire marks or the reports of headlights seen after midnight. Several locals back then had claimed to see lights dancing on the water the night of the storm. Investigators dismissed them as reflections of lightning. Now, reviewing archived weather cam footage, Palmer noticed a faint glow moving along the reservoir edge at 12:14 a.m., steady, not flickering. Headlights. She replayed the timestamp over and over. The angle suggested the car wasn't approaching the lake. It was already on the flooded embankment. Then the lights tilted downward and vanished. To Palmer, that single frame held 21 years of silence and motion. When the Honda was towed to the forensics bay, technicians began cataloging contents. A rusted disposable camera with intact film. 2 melted key fobs. A notebook sealed in a Ziploc bag, still legible. On the first page, dated September 6, 2002, Grace had written, "Camped near spillway. Rain coming in fast. Caleb says road will hold." The next entry. "Water rising. Lenny says it's fine. Just run off." And the final line before the ink blurred. "Headlights behind us." The film from the disposable camera was sent for recovery. Technicians warned most frames were likely overexposed or decayed, but 3 images survived. One showed the group at sunset beside their tent, smiling, lake behind them glass smooth. Another showed a flashlight beam crossing water, blurred by motion. The third was almost entirely dark, except for twin points of light, like headlights, reflected off rippling water. Renee Palmer stared at the enlarged print, the faint shape of the SUV's rear window visible near the bottom edge. Something, or someone, had been behind them when they vanished. The forensic bay smelled of lake water and rust. Technicians in waterproof suits peeled back the silt-stained upholstery, every scrape of metal echoing like a clock tick through the hangar. Detective Renee Palmer stood beside the Honda's open hatch, arms folded, notebook in hand. For her, this wasn't just a vehicle. It was a timeline sealed by water pressure and time. They started with what could survive the decades: fabric threads, personal objects, and trace evidence still trapped in small pockets the current couldn't reach. Inside the glove compartment, a wallet stuck together by mud contained a student ID, Caleb Rhodes, University of Arizona. Inside a side pocket, 3 Polaroids. In one, Caleb stood beside a campfire, grinning. Another showed Sofia Morales tying her hair under a baseball cap. The third, taken on the same night, captured all 4 friends with flash glare bouncing off their eyes. Palmer studied the image, finger tracing a faint reflection near the left margin. Beyond the group, in darkness, was a light streak she couldn't explain. Headlights, maybe, but too high, too centered, almost like a beam from an elevated position. The medical examiner confirmed the skeletal remains matched all 4 through dental records. The cause of death, drowning, consistent with rapid submersion. But that only answered how. The question remained why. Palmer reviewed the original 2002 maps. The eastern access road was gravel then, ending 50 feet from the shoreline. After the storm that weekend, rainfall estimates topped 6 inches in 12 hours. Flood debris could have disguised the edge of the embankment, turning it into what looked like drivable land. If they left camp in darkness, trusting memory more than sight, a single wrong angle could have sent them sliding directly into deep water. Still, something didn't sit right. The note in Grace's journal, "Headlights behind us." If they'd been the only group there, whose lights were those? Palmer went back to county records. One ranger's report from September 7, 2002, caught her attention. It described a gray pickup parked near the dam at 11 p.m., unregistered, never identified. The ranger had noted it because it was gone when he passed again 30 minutes later. That timestamp aligned almost exactly with the 12:14 a.m. footage of headlights near the water. She pulled the ranger's name from the bottom, Officer Trent Mullen, retired, now living in Mesa. She called him. When Mullen opened the door of his tidy desert home, he looked startled. "After all these years," he said, "I thought that case was buried deeper than the lake." He remembered the night clearly, the storm, the wind, and the lone pickup near the dam access. "I flashed my high beams, and the driver flicked theirs twice back. I figured they were fishermen trying to clear out before the rain hit. Should have checked the plates. Still bugs me." Palmer asked, "Can you remember the color? Anything distinctive?" He squinted, thinking. Tailgate sticker, white circle, maybe a camera logo, something about photography. That single phrase pulled an old name from memory, Travis Kohler. In 2002, Kohler was a freelance landscape photographer who'd been working on a storm reflection series for an outdoor magazine. He'd even sold prints of Silvercross Reservoir. Taken the same weekend, the group vanished. Palmer tracked his file. No criminal record. Relocated to Oregon in 2005, still active in photography until his death in 2018. The archived prints from that month were stored online under a defunct gallery domain. She found them on an old database mirror, grainy 3-megapixel shots labeled only by date. 2 were standard landscape frames, the third froze her in place. It showed Silvercross Lake at night, storm clouds backlit by lightning. Near the center of the photo, barely visible unless brightened, were 4 faint reflections on the water, the shape of headlights sinking downward. The camera's metadata read 12:15 a.m., September 8, 2002. He'd photographed their final moments without realizing it. Palmer printed the image on matte paper, enlarged it, and brought it to the families privately. There were tears, silence, and one whispered line from Lenny Norton. So that's what the lights were. But even with proof of accident, Palmer wanted completeness, something more than tragic coincidence. She returned to the recovered artifacts. Among them was Sofia's phone, a flip-style Nokia, corroded but with SIM intact. Data recovery pulled fragments, a call log showing one outgoing number dialed at 12:13 a.m., 2 minutes before the crash. The call never connected. Coverage had dropped. The number belonged to 911 dispatch. They'd realized the danger and tried to call for help. That finding changed the tone of the case. No longer a mystery of misbehavior or recklessness, it was a moment of panic, a wrong turn during a flash flood. Palmer assembled a reconstruction using LiDAR scans, elevation data, and weather record. Her model showed that the runoff from the northern ridge could have created a false causeway of compacted debris, smooth enough for tires, only inches above a steep drop. The group likely tried to reposition their SUV during rising water, headlights reflecting off surface foam. The embankment collapsed, sending the vehicle down at a 40-degree angle into 12 feet of depth. The sound of thunder could have drowned any cries for help. By morning, the reservoir was calm again, the surface undisturbed. When the story broke, the public treated it as closure. News anchors said words like "finally" and "answers." But Palmer didn't feel finished. She drove out to Silvercross herself on a quiet Tuesday when the cleanup crews had left and the lake sat half empty, exposing red banks lined with stumps. She parked near the old spillway where the friends had last camped. Bits of their fire ring were still visible, black stones half buried. She found herself imagining their laughter, the smell of rain coming, The brief moment before headlights turned and choices solidified. There was peace here now, but also an echo of urgency that hadn't faded. That evening, as she packed up her files, one of the techs from forensics rushed in with a box. "Found this wedged under the driver's seat while cleaning the interior," he said. It was a small cassette tape, sealed in a plastic recorder, waterlogged but salvageable. The model was an old Olympus voice note device, popular with students back then. Grace had probably used it for field notes. They aired it out, cleaned the heads, and hit play. At first, static. Then a woman's voice, Grace's, thin, breathy, but calm. "Testing, Saturday night, storm moving in. Sofia says thunder sounds like drums. Caleb says we'll leave before it hits. Lenny's filming. He says he wants to catch lightning on camera." More static, then another faint clip. "Wind's up. The water's moving. Looks higher. Caleb says it's fine. If anyone finds this, tell my mom we tried to wait it out." The tape ended there, sound swallowed by a low hiss. Renee Palmer sat still for a long time, listening to that hiss, like the sound of distant rain. When the families met again weeks later, she played the recovered audio privately in a conference room. There were no screams, no chaos, just four young voices laughing, unaware that history was closing in around them. It gave the parents something they hadn't had in 2 decades, a last memory, not of disappearance, but of life. Palmer closed her file folder that night and wrote one line at the bottom. "Case resolved. Truth recovered by time." When the story broke, the public treated it as closure. News anchors said words like "finally" and "answers." But Palmer didn't feel finished. She drove out to Silvercross herself on a quiet Tuesday, when the cleanup crews had left and the lake sat half empty, exposing red banks lined with stumps. She parked near the old spillway where the friends had last camped. Bits of their fire ring were still visible, black stones half buried. She found herself imagining their laughter, the smell of rain coming, the brief moment before headlights turned and choices solidified. There was peace here now, but also an echo of urgency that hadn't faded. That evening, as she packed up her files, one of the techs from forensics rushed in with a box. "Found this wedged under the driver's seat while cleaning the interior," he said. It was a small cassette tape, sealed in a plastic recorder, waterlogged but salvageable. The model was an old Olympus voice note device, popular with students back then. Grace had probably used it for field notes. They aired it out, cleaned the heads, and hit play. At first, static. Then a woman's voice, Grace's, thin, breathy, but calm. "Testing, Saturday night, storm moving in. Sofia says thunder sounds like drums. Caleb says we'll leave before it hits. Lenny's filming. He says he wants to catch lightning on camera." More static, then another faint clip. "Wind's up. The water's moving. Looks higher. Caleb says it's fine. If anyone finds this, tell my mom we tried to wait it out." The tape ended there, sound swallowed by a low hiss. Renee Palmer sat still for a long time, listening to that hiss, like the sound of distant rain. When the families met again weeks later, she played the recovered audio privately in a conference room. There were no screams, no chaos, just four young voices laughing, unaware that history was closing in around them. It gave the parents something they hadn't had in 2 decades, a last memory not of disappearance, but of life. Palmer closed her file folder that night and wrote one line at the bottom. "Case resolved. Truth recovered by time."